Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shows, desolators, peasants, vassals, citizens. I'm a useful idiot, and today's Memorial Day, and it's a good day to talk about something that people don't really talk about, and that's the fact that when support the troops comes out of the mouths of politicians and our government, they don't really mean it. It's just another slogan for them. It's just another opportunity. And I know that sounds pretty cynical, but it's also true. So, and then you'll notice that I actually thought about doing this video around Armed Forces Day, but I decided to wait for Memorial Day. And kind of interesting in itself that we have Armed Forces Day, which I guess is for soldiers who are alive, and then we have Memorial Day, which is for soldiers who are dead. And but I want to get to this this feeling I have that it's just another political slogan. More political opportunism when they talk about support the troops. And of course, that's as low as it gets. One can have an existential argument about what the reality of the military is and soldiers and its place in the world. But that's not really why I'm here. This is more of a gut level feeling. I'm pretty biased. I come from a military family. My father was in the military for 40 years and served in Vietnam, and most of my family, extended family, which includes 12 uncles. All of them served in the military as well. So, so I'm speaking from that vantage point. So, so first of all, let's look at all the examples that we've seen where the government supports the troops. And one example is the fact that we have a veteran, a military veteran, killing himself every single day, year in and year out now. And the government and the government's representatives and the military marginalized this pain and despair of soldiers in these war zones, and these people end up killing themselves. And so their answer thus far is I think they've come up with a new drug. So they're going to basically sedate all veterans so that they don't kill themselves. And then another way the government supports the troops is now, returning veterans are part of a government watch list for domestic terrorism. So, returning soldiers from Iraq and Afghanistan are automatically being watched by the government. And another example of how the government supports the troops is it turns out that all the too big to fail banks that the government bailed out preyed on soldiers fighting overseas and foreclosed on their homes and took advantage of them at every turn. And of course, the government's going to let them off the hook for doing that as well. And then we have the fact that the homeless rate in the United States is highest among veterans. And the only companies that will step up to the plate are a company like Walmart, who says they're going to hire 100,000 veterans, but of course they are barely livable wages. But speaking of barely livable wages, a lot of the military seems to be extremely underpaid as well. I kind of looked into it at first, the military wages, because I was wondering why the government spent so much money on private security that costs $150,000 to $250,000 a year per person, and how that compared to the average enlisted men and people serving in the military. So it turns out the salary of the lowest ranked soldier with 1 year's service is $15,480. That's right, $15,480. Way to go to support the troops. You know, granted, I know they get room and board and those expenses covered in the military, but nonetheless, that's a pretty low wage. If you're an experienced corporal of 3 years, you bump up to $19,980, which in this country is almost near the poverty level. So, so that compares the contract. So there's another slap in the face for the military with pretty low wages. As a matter of fact, Tommy Franks, the general that led our military in our overseas campaigns, was in the military for 36 years, and he made $153,950, and that's actually less than what the average private security contractor mercenary that the government hires. So some of Tommy Frank's bodyguards actually make more than he does. And the other part of that was interesting to me, I found out when my father died, and that's the fact that my mother doesn't get his military benefits, his military pension. And one could also get in the argument about government pensions, but that's for another day as well. On topic, the fact that a soldier cannot pass on his pension to his wife or his family, but firefighters and cops, their pensions get passed on to their spouses. So that's another way that the military is not supporting the troops, and not to mention the fact that cops and firefighters generally make 3 or 4 or 5 times what the average U.S. soldier makes, and get to retire pretty early with full pensions as well. So anyway, there's another way that we have a government that doesn't support the troops. And then we have the Gulf War syndrome. And just like soldiers returning from Vietnam who suffered from Agent Orange, the thing that actually eventually ended up killing my father, the government never really took responsibility for the exposure of our own troops to Agent Orange sprayed all over Vietnam. And we had the same thing happen in the first Gulf War, with all these anthrax vaccines and all the toxins in the air from burning oil wells. And U.S. soldiers are still fighting to get compensated for a very real malady. And then another aspect of the way the government doesn't really support the U.S. troops is that when U.S. military vote overseas, it really doesn't matter to the government whether they actually get their votes counted and get them back to the United States. And we've seen that time and time again. And then who can forget that during the last invasion of Iraq, U.S. soldiers had to oftentimes buy their own body armor on private and eBay and buying online, because our own government couldn't even provide body armor for these soldiers. And another glaring example of the government supporting the troops is privatizing how soldiers' remains are taken care of when they come back to the United States, something the military should continue to handle. But instead, we end up finding that remains of our veterans end up in landfills. Who could forget that story? There's a very, very glaring example of the government not supporting our troops. And aside from all this ballyhoo, even from the likes of John McCain, we still have this kind of opportunism in the government. And the idea of support the troops is just another political slogan. And the other thing about these mercenaries and these cops, as it turns out, they're getting paid a lot better than our U.S. soldiers. And these cops and these mercenaries obviously are serving corporations, where our soldiers, our fine young soldiers, are taught they are serving our citizens. And that's another reason probably why they end up on the government domestic terrorist watch list. And then we get to the fact that during World War II, a lot of our politicians were serving in the military, and in fact, a lot of Hollywood actors even served in the military. And we had a representation of the military that truly was a cross-section, and there was patriotism, true patriotism, and everybody participated, and everybody was in on it together. And unfortunately, by the time we got to Vietnam, of course, it was no longer an honor to serve in the military. And my father certainly got subjected to abuse when he returned home from that war. And but also, look, another thing about Vietnam, most of the people had to be drafted, and there were no politicians serving over there except for a few exceptions of John McCain and John Kerry and the like. And then we also had all the people like Dick Cheney, who got all sorts of deferments. So unlike World War II, where our politicians gladly served overseas, our class of politicians in the Vietnam and post-Vietnam era do not want to serve in overseas adventures. And that goes for the Hollywood crowd too. They showed their patriotism and served in World War II, but now with the liberal ideology captivating Hollywood, of course, none of them will participate in war. And while we have these wars going on, they are living like gods. But anyway, I digress. So anyway, there you have a comparison too of how the government supports our troops, and it's just more political sloganeering. And I would also add at the end, I also believe Ron Paul's version of how we support the troops. And that is we give them all the support and all the protection and all the armament they need, and then put them in a moral, right, defensive situation that everyone can believe in. That's the best way to support our troops. So there we go. Happy Memorial Day to everyone. My hearts go out to everyone like myself who have many veterans buried in cemeteries all across this country. I'm a useful idiot. Don't you be one too.